I didn't cry at the closing. Not when the notary slid the paper across the table, not when my daughter smiled and said, "This is the right thing, Mom. You'll see." I just picked up the pen and signed my name the way I'd signed 1,000 things over 63 years. Grocery lists, school permission slips, a marriage certificate, a death certificate. You learn after a while that your signature is just a habit. You stop thinking about what it means. I should have thought about it that time. My name is Loretta June Weston. I'm 68 years old. I live in the same house in Covington, Tennessee, where I raised 2 children, grew a vegetable garden that my husband Edwin was endlessly proud of, and buried a dog named Biscuit under the oak tree by the back fence. Edwin died 4 years ago. A heart attack, quick and without warning. The way the doctors always say is merciful but never actually feels that way. After he passed, people started looking at me differently, like I was a problem that needed solving. My daughter was the first to offer a solution. She drove down from Nashville in early November, the year after Edwin died. She'd brought her husband, and they sat at my kitchen table with coffee I'd made and a yellow legal pad she kept referring to, and she said she'd been thinking about me, about the house, about what would happen if something happened to me. "You're out here alone, Mom," she said. "What if you fell? What if you had a stroke?" I told her I was fine. "I know you're fine right now," she said, "but we have to plan for the future." I understood what she meant. She meant her future. I just didn't understand it yet. She had the idea all worked out before she ever got in the car that morning. Her husband had a business, a property management company, she said, very successful, expanding into residential investments. They could put my house into a trust, a family trust. It would protect me from taxes, protect the property from probate, keep everything in the family where it belonged. She pulled out a brochure, an actual brochure. She handed it across the table like she was a real estate agent and I was a stranger. "All you'd have to do is sign the paperwork," she said. "It stays your home, Mom. Nothing changes for you. You just won't have to worry about any of it anymore." I remember looking at the brochure. I remember the way the light came through the kitchen window and hit the edge of my coffee cup. I remember thinking that this was my daughter, who I had rocked to sleep during thunderstorms, who I had driven to cheerleading practice every Tuesday and Thursday for 3 years, who had cried on my shoulder after her first real heartbreak. I signed. I want you to understand something about that moment. I wasn't confused. I wasn't pressured in the way people imagine. No one raised a voice. No one threatened anything. I was simply tired of being looked at like a problem, and she was offering me a way to stop being one. She was offering me the thing I wanted most in that season of my life, which was to believe that the people I loved were going to be all right. That's how it works. That's the part nobody tells you. The paperwork was thorough. I didn't read all of it because she was sitting right there explaining every page. And I trusted her the way you trust someone you've known their entire life, which is to say completely and without thinking. I initialed 14 pages. I signed my name 3 times. Her husband witnessed it. They took copies. They left before dinner. The first year, nothing changed. That's the part that makes it so hard to explain to people. You say someone took advantage of you, and they want to know when it happened. And you have to tell them that it happens slowly over a long time, in ways that each seemed reasonable on their own. My daughter called regularly. She handled the property tax payments, "So you don't have to worry about deadlines, Mom," and sent me a summary every few months on a spreadsheet her husband had made. Numbers I didn't understand in columns I never asked about. I trusted the numbers because I trusted her. The second year, I noticed the heating bill seemed high. I called the company myself, and they said the account was in the trust's name now and they could only discuss it with the authorized party. I called my daughter. "Mom, that's normal," she said. "Everything runs through the trust now. That's how it's supposed to work. I'll handle it." She handled it. I assumed that meant she paid it. I started to feel slowly the way you feel when you walk into a room and can't quite remember why you're there. Like there was something I meant to check on and kept forgetting. The garden felt smaller that year. I stopped canning as much. Edwin had always been the one who said, "Loretta, you could feed a small town with what you put up every September." And without him saying it, I somehow stopped believing it was true. Grief does that. It takes things from you that have nothing to do with the person you lost. I was grieving, and she knew it, and I think she counted on it without ever deciding to. That's the part I've had to make peace with, that sometimes people don't plan to hurt you. They just choose themselves every day, in small ways, until the choosing becomes its own kind of theft. The 2nd December, the water heater went out. I called my daughter because that was what we'd arranged. Any repairs over $200 were to come from the property management account her husband maintained for the house. She said she'd take care of it. 2 weeks passed. I was heating water on the stove for a bath. I called again. The contractor is backed up, she said. It's the holidays, Mom. Everything slows down. The water heater was replaced in January. I never saw a receipt. I asked once and she said she'd email it, and she never did, and I didn't ask again. I can't tell you exactly why. Some combination of not wanting to seem ungrateful, not wanting to cause tension, and a feeling I couldn't name at the time. A low, quiet hum of something wrong that I kept mistaking for my own paranoia. The third spring, my neighbor Betty came over for coffee. Betty Ray Simmons has lived 3 houses down for 22 years. She is the kind of woman who knows the property values on every street within a 5-mile radius the way other women know their grandchildren's birthdays. Automatically, with confidence, and ready to tell you at any moment. She'd heard something, she said. She'd heard that the property management company my daughter's husband ran had filed for a change of use permit on a lot out on Route 9. What lot? I said. She looked at me carefully. Loretta, she said. That's your lot. Edwin had inherited a piece of land from his uncle years before we married, 11 acres out on Route 9, mostly wooded, with a creek running through the back half. We'd talked for 30 years about building a small cabin on it someday. We never did. After Edwin died, I'd stopped thinking about it much. It was in the trust now. I felt something happen in my chest. Not pain, more like a shift. Like something that had been leaning against a wall for a long time finally fell over. I didn't call my daughter. Not yet. I drove myself to the county assessor's office on a Tuesday morning. I wore my good cardigan, the green one Edwin always liked. The woman at the front desk was patient with me. She pulled up the records. The lot on Route 9 was still in the trust's name, but the trust documents had been amended. 18 months ago. The amendment had added my son-in-law as co-trustee with full disposition authority. There was a development agreement attached. A developer out of Memphis had an option to purchase the land. The option had been signed by my son-in-law. My name was not on it. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the county assessor's office for a long time. The engine was off. The radio was off. I looked at the copy of the document the woman had made for me, and I thought about the November afternoon my daughter had sat at my kitchen table, with her yellow legal pad, explaining how everything would stay the same. You just won't have to worry anymore. I wasn't worried. Not yet. I was something harder to describe. A feeling like standing in a room you've lived in your whole life and suddenly noticing the walls are a different color than you thought. I called an attorney that afternoon. His name was Alfred Pruitt, and he'd done Edwin's will years before. His secretary fit me in the next morning. I brought everything I had, the original trust documents, the amendment, the copy of the development agreement, the property tax summaries my daughter had sent over the years. Alfred spread them across his desk and was quiet for a long time. Loretta, he said finally, did you authorize this amendment? I told him I hadn't seen it. He was quiet again. Do you know what date you signed the original trust? I knew the date. He turned his computer monitor toward me. The amendment was dated 14 months after the original signing. My signature was on it. I looked at my own handwriting and felt the floor tilt. I didn't sign that, I said. That's not. I never saw this document. Alfred nodded slowly. He didn't say the word I was thinking. He just said we needed to verify a few things and he would be in touch. I drove home with both hands on the wheel and the radio off. What followed was not dramatic in the way people expect these stories to be dramatic. There were no screaming arguments, no confrontations where someone finally broke down and confessed. There was paperwork. There were phone calls between attorneys. There was a handwriting analysis, requested quietly by Alfred, on the signature on the amendment document. There was a long, careful review of the trust amendment's notarization. A notary stamp from a woman who, it turned out, was the administrative assistant at my son-in-law's office. My daughter called me during that period, normally, checking in. She asked how the garden was coming and whether I'd been to church. I answered her normally. I said the tomatoes were late this year. I said I'd been to church. I was 78 years old in that season of my life. And I had learned something that I don't think I could have learned any younger. That the quietest response is sometimes the most powerful one. That you can stand completely still and let someone walk into the conclusion they've made for themselves. She didn't know what I knew. I let her not know. The development option on the Route 9 land expired before the sale could complete. Alfred moved quickly and well, and the amendment to the trust was challenged on grounds that I will not go into detail about here because they are still matters. My attorney asked me to be careful with. What I will tell you is that the land is mine again, properly, cleanly, in a trust that I restructured myself, with Alfred as the trustee and not a member of my family. What I will tell you is that the house is mine, the taxes are current, and I understand every document that has my name on it. What I will tell you is that my daughter called me the afternoon things were finalized. She called to explain. She said they had meant to tell me. She said it had gotten complicated. She said her husband had made some decisions without fully consulting her, and she was sorry and she hoped I understood. I told her I understood. I didn't ask what she had known or when she had known it. Some questions don't have answers that help you, and I've lived long enough to know the difference. She came down from Nashville 2 months later. She sat at my kitchen table again, in the same chair, and I made coffee and we talked about her children and the garden and a quilt I was working on. She cried a little, at one point, and I handed her a tissue. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't sad. I was sad in a way that I think will always be there, like an old scar you stop noticing until the weather changes. I was sad because I love my daughter, because I remember who she was before she became someone who would do this. Because both of those things are true at the same time, and neither one cancels the other out. My will is filed with Alfred now. I updated it last fall, on a bright October morning, with the windows open and the smell of the garden coming through. I left the Route 9 land to my granddaughter, my daughter's youngest, who is 12 and likes to catch frogs at the creek and wants to be a veterinarian. I want her to have the land when she's old enough to understand what it means. I wrote her a letter that will go with the documents. I told her that her great-great-uncle homesteaded that ground and that her great-grandfather fished that creek his whole life, and that the land remembers things even when the people do not. I told her to read everything she signs. Betty Ray came for coffee last Thursday. We sat on the back porch in the afternoon light, and she told me about a development going in on the far end of town. And I told her about the quilt I'm almost finished with, the one with the double wedding ring pattern that takes forever and is worth every minute. The garden is coming in well this year. The tomatoes are ahead of schedule for once. Edwin would have said I could feed a small town. I think he would have been right.